Heyo Rad-poles, back at it again with another video. This one is a little different than the last few videos, and by that I mean it's not fan art. I'm drawing a cute little froggy this time. Let me paint you a scene. Inside everyone there are 2 wolves. Or possibly more, because they are pack animals and therefore there should be more than probably 2, but in that case we're gonna go with 3 for my analogy here, because the 3 wolves in me are frogs, horror creatures, and magical girls, or anything really that sparkles, which all of the above can. Horror creatures included because I'm not one to discriminate. On this glorious day, the frog finally won out. The poor dear, he never really wins against Sailor Moon or the xenomorph, but you know, in the end, he did. He pulled a victory out with his little froggy hands. And because of that, he gets a little library, because he is a librarian. Thinking about it now, though, a group of frogs is called an army, so I feel like an army actually should be able to take on a xenomorph. Notice I said take on, not win. That's very important. How many actual signatures do you think we'd need to petition a movie like that? Do you hear me, Ridley Scott? Watch my frog videos, I know you do, and make me a movie of an army of frogs versus a xenomorph. I dare you. You're not brave enough. He's not ready to take on the relatability of little pudding balls with limbs that scream when they're upset, and oh my god, if that wouldn't make a great film, I don't know what would. Anyways, we were drawing, right? Let's get back to that. So, as we all know, the ongoing problem, as I'm sure everyone has faced at some point in their life, when you draw one cute frog, you have to draw multiple cute frogs. This one was the start of this series. I call them frogs with jobs, but most of them are actually just hobbies, and that's really better because capitalism sucks. Everything starts in a library, right? I've watched horror movies. Montage. Camera cuts away, camera cuts back. Oh, we've learned so much. What did you mean the murderer was me the entire time? I thought it was the friends we made along the way. And the friend I'm interested in making is this little library lad. My main goal when setting out with this drawing was to draw something simple and clean and thick lines, flat colors, and you'll find out if you know me that it's one of those things that I strive for in many pieces and never quite reach because it always ends up being overcomplicated and way too busy. But that's fine because in the end I actually really enjoyed the way it looked. Simple and clean is more like complex and muddy. Sorry, Utada Hikaru. Yikes. The mindset persists. Even though I set out with a specific look in mind, the goal is to not be disappointed with what I actually come up with, right? To this day, frogs have never disappointed me, and if they disappoint you, keep that frog slander to yourself. Thank you. For the art, I wanted something organic for the setting. Obviously, a library is in order because it's a little sweatered up reading dude and he needs a place to read. But for that library, I didn't want to go like modern or Star Trek-y. I felt a frog would have it built out of a tree, or the walls would be more wood-like. Every good frog loves a log, and since it rhymes, it only makes sense that they would do crimes. And then write about said crimes and put it in their little libraries. I originally planned the windows to be my source of light in this one, but I decided at some point that reading can't go without raining, and I smited that sunny weather idea real fast. But then by taking away that light source, I of course had to replace it with something else, and what's better than floaty magic glowy orbs? I feel like they're a solution to many a things. Are you sad? Here's a floaty magic glowing orb. Are you hungry? Here's a glowy magic floating orb. Are you not liking yourself? Be a floaty magic glowy orb. The idea for this palette was to keep it rather warm. The only bad thing is when I usually think about frogs, I think of like cool greens and cool blues. So, not the best for a red background, but I guess maybe, well, contrast, and they're complementary colors. Never mind. I know art. Because I put green in there, I decided that there needed to be more blue just to make it feel a little more cohesive. That's the word. I realize now that watching this speed paint, it's kind of hard to see what I'm doing because I spent so much of it just making little lines of texture. The texture was more than necessary though, and in the end I honestly think that it worked out better than it would have been if I tried to do something more blendy and watercolory and flowy. I feel like the starks of the shadows against the highlights does a lot to show depth in the wood. It's not a bad thing by any means. Texture is a great time, but it also is the exact opposite of simple and clean. It was about at this point that I decided much more greenery was in order to brighten up that space. I had done so much in browns and reds that it really needed that complementary green that couldn't just be brought by my little frogman. So then came in the ivy. Ivy is fun to draw, by the way, so if you ever have the chance just to like sit down and doodle some ivy, it's strangely therapeutic, and I'm actually all for it. I very highly recommend. As we watch past me detail trillions of tiny leaves, let's talk about other things. So, if you were a frog in a library, what books would you be reading? I originally had on there for him to be reading The Lily Pad of Love, but I lost the title someplace after the sketch and just never actually put anything back onto the front of the books. But I can only imagine what their core interests and depths of knowledge could reflect in these libraries. Looking up certain things on what do frogs represent in cultures. Apparently, they represent renewal, vitality, and good luck, as well as good omens and signaling prosperity, which all sounds dandy and great to me. Make that 10 times better when you wear glasses and a sweater. Let's go. Anybody else here like frogs? God, I love frogs. You know what I don't love, though? Lighting. Especially when it's extremely hard for me to choose where the light source is coming from, as well as how bright I want to make it. This whole picture I was hoping to be like, you know, cozy and warm, and that was a great idea when it was on a sunny day, but the minute I put rain in here, I'm like, wait a minute, how do you shade rain? Not shade. How do you light rain, but also still make it light in the room? Magic helped, the glowy balls helped, but then I put in so many of those light sources I had to figure out how they would illuminate the different surfaces, and in the end, I can honestly tell you, I didn't do that well, and that's totally fine because I still like how warm and cozy it ended up in the end. I ended up going back and adding some like blues to the deeper parts and adding like this nice magenta to like the under highlights of the yellow because it just made it more vibrant. And after adding all the drop shadows to the ivy, it kind of faked the light source, and I'll go with it. It's the little things that count, right? Oh, here's where I'm trying to shade him, and I was trying to make him look, you know, wet like a frog, but not like overly goopy wet, because that's not the best if you're turning pages in a book. The pages would stick together, wouldn't they? I mean, that's how that usually goes, right? I'm not a scientist, but I claim to be one sometimes. Maybe he's reading about science. What is this boy reading about? I'm just so curious. At this point, I was almost done with the frog boy himself. Got all those shadings and highlights in, but then I had to redo the texture on his sweater because it wasn't to my liking. And if you're going to draw a cable knit, you go all the way. At least that's what I told myself when I redrew it like 4 times. But, in the end, happy with that overall texture. Moved on to the books. The books were the last thing I needed to do in this picture, and of course it's the most I have to do. I ended up putting every color of book on a different layer, so that way when I was finished with shading and highlighting each of them, I could still adjust the opacities or hues, so that the end result didn't look too monotonous, and it still gave me the freedom to change the colors overall if I really needed to. Because if there's one thing I am, it's indecisive when it comes to a color palette. We're in the final stretch. Here's about where I started adding the rain texture to the window above, which did a lot to make it look like glass and not just a gradient abyss. Totally fine with the gradient abyss, but sometimes you just want rain on some glass. I had a lot of fun adding all the highlights to it, only to realize that I probably overdid it and then had to blur most of them out. But once that was done, it was completed, and I'm happy. Like I said, it's the first one in this series. I also have a couple other frogs with jobs. I've made an artist one, makes sense, that's topical. And then I've also made them matching stickers just because I thought it was super cute, and they're all available in my shop too, not that anybody has to go there. But I do have a shop. I'm planning on making many more, including a chef and maybe like an astronomer. I don't know, frogs lend themselves to so many things, and so it only makes sense that they need to be in everything. Thanks again everyone for watching, I really appreciate it. If you have a name for this little man, please put it in the comments below. I so need to give him names and all of the frogs to come. Thanks again everybody, bye!